After decades of paying for my daughter's future, she and her husband sat across the holiday table and told me my house was now their dream home. They thought I was too old, too weak to fight back. But they underestimated the patience and the memory of an old man who spent his life working with numbers. If you've ever felt like family treated you like a bank instead of blood, then you'll understand this story. Subscribe, share, and tell me in the comments, when does love cross the line into exploitation, and what would you do about it? The smell of roasted turkey and sage filled the kitchen, a scent I had curated for 40 consecutive Thanksgivings. It was more than just food, it was the smell of memory. The ghost of my wife, Eleanor's laughter clinging to the steam rising from the roasting pan. At 68, I was still the head of the kitchen, a general commanding an army of one. My daughter, Chloe, and her husband, Derek, had arrived an hour ago. Not to help, but to be present, a hollow phrase they used to excuse their detached existence. Through the doorway, I could see them in the living room, a room filled with the ghosts of happier times. They sat on the sofa Eleanor and I had picked out together, its floral pattern now faded. Derek's face was illuminated by the blue glow of his phone, his thumb swiping endlessly. Chloe, my daughter, was admiring her new manicure, turning her hand this way and that under the lamp, as if it were the most fascinating object in the world. I carried the golden brown turkey out on the heavy platter, the one we only used for holidays. It was a small, quiet point of pride for an old man, a testament that some things, at least, remained constant. Looks amazing, Dad, Chloe said, her voice lilting, but her eyes never left her phone. It was a compliment delivered to the room, not to me. After the meal, a meal I ate mostly in silence while they discussed a new app Derek was interested in. The moment came. It did not arrive with a shout or an unreasonable demand. It arrived softly, after the plates were cleared, as I was about to bring out Eleanor's pumpkin pie, the recipe for which was a sacred text in this house. It was wrapped in a blanket of feigned concern. Dad, Chloe began, finally setting her phone down. That was the signal. The phone going dark meant business. Derek and I have been thinking, you've worked your whole life. This house, it's just too big for one person. He fell silent, my hand still on the pie server. The metal felt cold against my skin. The house wasn't too big. It was full of Eleanor, full of a younger Chloe, full of a life that seemed to be fading from everyone's memory but mine. Derek looked up from his own device. Placing it on the table with a soft click, he leaned forward, assuming the posture of a man about to deliver a difficult but necessary truth. His voice was as smooth as oil. That's right, Dad. We found a wonderful place for you. A first-class retirement community out in the suburbs. It has a pool, a clubhouse, nurses on call 24/7. You'll have friends your own age. We've run the numbers, and it's the most efficient solution. We'll cover all the expenses. I looked at them. I saw the matching, earnest expressions on their faces. This house was where Chloe took her first steps, her tiny hand gripping my finger. It was where my wife, Eleanor, had planted the hydrangeas by the window, the ones that still bloomed a brilliant blue every summer. Every corner held a memory, a story, and now they wanted me to leave it all behind. Why? I asked, my voice hoarse, a single word that felt like it was clawing its way up my throat. We need more space. Dad, Chloe said, her gaze shifting to a point on the wall just over my shoulder. She couldn't look at me. Derek is starting his own company. We need a proper home office, a place to meet clients, and we're trying for a baby. This house would be perfect for our little family. Derek placed his hand on Chloe's, a calculated, reassuring gesture meant for me to see. It's the best thing for everyone. Dad, you get the care you need, and we get a solid start. It's an underutilized asset, and we can make it work for all of us. You've always wanted what's best for Chloe, haven't you? He had used my own love as a weapon against me. He spoke of my home as an asset. I looked at my daughter, searching for the little girl who used to hide behind my legs when strangers came to the door. I saw only a woman who nodded in agreement with her husband. A weak, small nod, as if trying to convince herself as much as me. She had made her choice. She had chosen her future with Derek, a future to be built on the foundation of my past. My first instinct was to rage, to list every sacrifice, every late night I worked, the college tuition I paid in full, but I looked at their faces, united and resolute, and I saw the futility of it. They weren't asking, they were informing. To argue would be to show them my pain, and my pain was a currency they no longer valued. An old accountant's mind took over. This was not a family discussion, it was a hostile takeover. And in a takeover, you don't fight a battle, you know you will lose. You feign compliance. You retreat. Consolidate your assets. And wait for the enemy to overextend. They saw an old man. They did not see the man who had structured financial plans for 30 years. This was not surrender. It was a strategic repositioning. I let out a long, slow breath. The sound of defeat. I simply put the pie server down. All right, I said, my voice barely a whisper. If that's what you want. The relief on their faces was immediate and sickening. It washed over them like a wave. They had won. Easily. Thanksgiving ended in an awkward quiet. They left with plates of leftovers and the keys to my future, leaving me alone in the house that would soon no longer be mine. A month later, I moved into the small, beige apartment, in the first-class community they had chosen. It was clean, sterile, and foreign. The air smelled of disinfectant and boiled vegetables. My life, a collection of 70 years of memories, was packed into a few cardboard boxes. The day I handed the house keys to Chloe, she hugged me. It was a brief, brittle embrace. Thanks, Dad. You're going to love it here. I did not answer. I just committed the hollow feeling of that hug to memory. The calls grew infrequent. The visits became non-existent. Instead, there were texts, brief and impersonal. Hey, Dad. I hope you're well. Super busy over here. The rent and fees for my new residence were paid automatically from my bank account. The joint account I had added Chloe's name to years ago in case of an emergency. The emergency, it turned out, was their lifestyle. I started to notice the strange withdrawals on the online statements I checked every night. A $5,000 charge from a luxury boutique. A weekend getaway to a ski resort. My life saving, the money Eleanor and I had carefully squirreled away, were becoming their entertainment fund. The only person I still spoke to was Maria, my old neighbor of 30 years. She would call sometimes, her voice laced with a concern that felt more genuine than my own daughter's. Art. I don't mean to pry, but there are a lot of loud parties. They dug up Eleanor's hydrangeas to build a new deck, and your son-in-law's new sports car, it blocks the driveway. Each update was a small stab. "Thank you for letting me know, Maria," was all I would say. I began my plan in silence. I am a retired accountant. Numbers and rules are my friends. I spent weeks in the public library, a ghost among the bookshelves, not reading novels, but studying bylaws and banking regulations. I was a man from another era, learning the weapons of the new one. My first move was simple. I opened a new bank account, in my name only, at a different institution. Then I went to my old bank and sat down with a personal banker, a young man whose suit was more expensive than his experience. "I'd like to close this account," I said, my voice firm and clear. The young man looked at me, surprised, a flicker of condescension in his eyes. "Sir, this is a joint account with Miss Chloe Peterson. We'll need both signatures to close it." "I'm aware," I replied, sliding a folded document across the polished desk. "This is a copy of the power of attorney agreement my daughter signed when we first opened the account, 10 years ago. If you'll direct your attention to Clause 7B, Section 2, it states that Party A, which is me, retains full authority to execute all transactions, including account closure, without the consent of Party B, which is her. I put that clause in to protect her, in case something ever happened to me. Now, I'm using it to protect myself." The banker's eyes widened as he read the fine print. His professional smile faltered. He called his manager, a woman with a severe haircut and an air of impatience. She read the document, her expression shifting from annoyance to grudging comprehension. After 20 tense minutes of hushed phone calls, they had to agree. My entire savings, every last cent, were transferred to the new account via a cashier's check. The joint account now held a balance of 0. My next call was to the credit card company, made from a payphone in the lobby. "I'd like to report a supplementary card, in the name of Chloe Peterson, as lost," I said, the lie flowing smoothly. "A necessary casualty in this quiet war. And please, cancel it permanently. I do not want a replacement." My final call was to the health insurance company. The premium family plan I had paid for, the one that covered both Chloe and Derek under its expensive umbrella, was downgraded to a personal plan, effective immediately. Everything was in place. The dominoes were set. I sat in my small, beige apartment, looking out the window at the other old folks, taking their slow, careful evening stroll. I did not feel triumph. I felt a cold, quiet peace. The game had begun. It took 2 weeks for the first tremor to reach me. 2 weeks of a quiet, ordered existence in my beige apartment. 2 weeks of drinking my coffee while it was still hot and reading the newspaper from front to back without interruption. It was the most peaceful I had felt in years. The calm before the storm I had summoned myself. The first call came on a Tuesday morning. It was Chloe. I recognized her unique ringtone, a cheerful pop song that now sounded like a siren. "Dad, what is wrong with my credit card?" she shrieked, the sound tinny and distorted by the phone's speaker. There was no hello, no preamble. "I'm at the grocery store." And they said it was declined. I had to leave a full cart of groceries at the checkout. "Do you know how embarrassing that is?" "Is that so?" I said, my voice even. I was looking out my window at a flock of pigeons pecking at the manicured lawn. "That's odd. You should probably call the bank." I did call the bank. They said the card was canceled by the primary account holder. "That's you." "Dad, what did you do?" "I'm just tidying up my finances." "Sweetheart," I said, the term of endearment feeling foreign and sharp on my tongue. A man my age needs to be more careful with his money. The call ended, not with a goodbye, but with a frustrated scream that was cut off as she hung up. It was the sound of a faucet being turned off. A faucet that had been running freely for a decade. I knew it was only the beginning. 2 days later, they appeared at my door. I saw them through the peephole, their forms distorted and menacing. Derek looked like he wanted to break the door down, while Chloe stood behind him, her face a mask of tear-streaked indignation. I opened the door just enough to talk, keeping the security chain latched. "You have to explain this," Derek bellowed, pushing against the door slightly. "Your rent payment was returned. Our health insurance claim was denied. The joint account is gone. What the hell are you playing at?" "I am managing my assets," I replied, looking directly at him. The chain between us felt like a physical representation of the new boundary I had drawn. "You have the house, the money in the bank. However, is mine, and I've decided I no longer wish to share it." "But what about your promise?" Chloe sobbed from behind her husband's shoulder. "You said you would always take care of us." "I took care of you your entire life." "Chloe," I said, my voice softening for a moment. "An old habit. I gave you a home. The rest, you and your husband will have to figure out for yourselves. It's called being an adult." Derek stepped closer, his face turning a blotchy red. "You old fool. Do you think this is a game? Are you trying to ruin us?" "I am simply stopping you from ruining me," I said, my voice firm again. "Now, I'd like you to leave my property." They left, trailing threats and insults down the hallway. But I knew this was not the end. It was merely the end of the beginning. A few days later, I had my weekly chess game with Sam Costello in the park. Sam is an old friend, a shrewd real estate broker who has seen every kind of human folly. As I was contemplating a move with my queen, Sam spoke without looking up from the board. "Art, I saw your son-in-law last week." "Oh, yeah, at an open house up on Eagle Crest, a $5 million place. He was with a couple of investor types, talking big about some cryptocurrency project." I paused, my hand hovering over the piece. Where would he get that kind of money? Sam shrugged, finally looking at me, his eyes sharp. That's not the strangest part. A few days later, a colleague in my office's mortgage department called me. He said Derek had applied for a $500,000 bridge loan, and the collateral he listed was your old house. The chess piece slipped from my fingers and clattered onto the board. "That's impossible. The deed is still in my name." "I know," Sam said, his voice serious. "That's why my colleague called. The paperwork Derek submitted looked authentic. But your signature, it looked a little off. They denied the loan and flagged his file. Art, he tried to steal your house." The anger I had been suppressing for months, a cold, hard knot in my stomach, began to burn. This was no longer about ingratitude. This was a crime. That evening, as if on cue, I received a call from an unknown number. A cold, professional voice spoke. "Am I speaking with Mr. Peterson? We're calling from Sterling Debt Recovery. We are attempting to locate a Derek Thompson regarding a delinquent personal loan of $25,000. All the pieces clicked into place. The cryptocurrency, the lavish lifestyle, the forged documents. My son-in-law was not just a lazy, entitled freeloader. He was a criminal. But they had one last move to make. A week later, a thick envelope arrived by certified mail. It was from a law firm. Chloe and Derek were petitioning the court for legal guardianship over me and my assets, on the grounds that I was showing a clear pattern of cognitive decline and was making financial decisions detrimental to myself and my family. And their star witness, the person prepared to testify in court about my supposed senility, it was Sarah, Chloe's best friend, the woman who had sat at my Thanksgiving table for years, who always praised my cooking, who called me her second dad. The trap had been sprung, but they did not know that the old man in the beige apartment had been preparing a much larger, much more patient trap of his own. The mediation did not take place in a courthouse. At their lawyer's suggestion, it was held in a private office, a neutral space designed to project an aura of calm, civilized resolution. The room was sterile, dominated by a long, polished mahogany table that reflected the grim faces around it. It smelled of expensive leather and quiet desperation. Chloe, Derek, and their lawyer sat on one side. Sarah, the star witness, sat behind them, twisting the strap of her purse, her face a carefully constructed mask of sorrow. On my side, there was only me and my lawyer, Mrs. Hayes, a woman whose quiet demeanor hid a mind as sharp as a shard of glass. Their lawyer, a man with a practiced, sympathetic voice, began. He painted a picture of a beloved father lost in the fog of old age. He presented my actions closing the account, canceling the cards, changing the insurance, not as calculated decisions, but as the erratic whims of a failing mind. My clients are not here out of greed. Madam Mediator, he said, his voice dripping with sincerity. They are here out of love. They are here to protect Mr. Peterson from himself, to safeguard the assets he worked his entire life to build before he does, in his confused state, gives them away or falls prey to a scammer. Then, Sarah was called to speak. She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue as she spoke of my episodes. She recounted how I had forgotten her son's name at a recent gathering. She failed to mention that I had never met her son before. She spoke of my newfound paranoia, describing the security chain on my door, as if it were the barricade of a madman. She twisted every normal act of an old man seeking privacy into a symptom of dementia. As she spoke, I looked at Chloe. My daughter would not meet my gaze. She just stared at her hands, folded on the table, a willing accomplice to this character assassination. When Sarah finished, a heavy silence filled the room. Mrs. Hayes let it hang there for a moment before she spoke, her voice calm and clear. Thank you, Miss Sarah. Your concern for your second dad is very touching. She then turned to the mediator. Madam, before we address Mr. Peterson's cognitive state, we believe a little context is in order regarding the loving concern of his family. Mrs. Hayes placed a small USB drive on the table. This is security footage from the camera of Maria, Mr. Peterson's neighbor of 30 years. The timestamp is 2:15 a.m. On the 15th of last month. She slid a laptop over and played the clip. The grainy, black and white video showed a figure in a hoodie trying to pry open the lock on my mailbox. The figure then looked up directly at the camera. It was Derek. Derek went rigid in his chair. His lawyer shot him a furious look. Perhaps he was simply trying to retrieve his father-in-law's mail to be helpful. Mrs. Hayes mused innocently. Or perhaps he was looking for bank statements. Let's move on. She produced a second, thicker file. This is a report from the Fraud Department of First National Bank, detailing an application for a $500,000 bridge loan made by Mr. Thompson. The listed collateral was Mr. Peterson's home. The application was denied because the signature on the deed transfer document was a clear forgery. She slid a copy of the forged signature next to a copy of my real one. They were similar, but not the same. Forgery, as you know, is a felony. Their lawyer jumped to his feet. Objection. This is unsubstantiated. These are baseless accusations meant to slander my client. Are they Mrs.? Hayes asked, her voice turning to ice. Then perhaps you'll find this next document more substantial. It is a sworn affidavit from Sterling Debt Recovery, detailing Mr. Thompson's delinquent personal loan of $25,000, which he acquired to, and I quote, invest in a high-yield cryptocurrency opportunity, an opportunity that has since collapsed. It seems Mr. Thompson's financial desperation predates his concern for his father-in-law's mental state. The room was utterly silent. The only sound was the faint hum of the air conditioning. Chloe was staring at Derek, her mouth slightly agape. Her eyes filled not with disappointment, but with a dawning horror. She was finally seeing the man she married. Sarah seemed to be trying to shrink into her chair, to become invisible. And finally, I said, speaking for the first time. My voice did not tremble. It was the voice of a man who had nothing left to lose and everything to defend. Regarding the house you need for your little family. I slid a single, crisp document across the table. It slid to a stop directly in front of Chloe. That is a copy of a legally executed and notarized deed of gift. Last week, I donated the house, in its entirety, to a charitable foundation I have established in my late wife's name, Eleanor's House. The foundation will provide temporary, secure housing for women and children fleeing domestic abuse. The house is no longer mine to be taken care of, and it will certainly never be yours. That was the final move, the checkmate. Derek said nothing. He simply stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor, and walked out of the room. He knew the game was over. Chloe collapsed, her head falling into her hands, her shoulders shaking with deep, silent sobs. They were not the tears of anger, but of utter devastation. The mediation was over. As Mrs. Hayes and I walked into the hallway, two plainclothes police officers who had been waiting patiently stepped forward. One of them placed a hand on Derek's shoulder as he stood by the elevator. Mr. Thompson, the officer said, his voice calm but firm. You're under arrest for suspicion of forgery and attempted fraud. I did not look back. I walked with Mrs. Hayes out of the building and into the clean, cold air of the city, taking a deep breath for the first time in what felt like a year. The final scene of this story did not happen in a courtroom or an office. It happened 3 months later. I was sitting in a small cafe, a real one, with worn wooden tables and the smell of fresh coffee. I was reading a letter, written in a neat, careful hand on simple lined paper. Dear Mr. Peterson, it began. I don't know how to thank you. My son and I have a safe place to sleep tonight because of Eleanor's house. You have given us a chance to start over. My phone buzzed on the table. A text message from Chloe. It contained only 3 words. I'm sorry, Dad. I read the message, then set the phone down, screen side down. I took a sip of my coffee. It wasn't bitter. It tasted like peace. Justice. I've learned. Doesn't always have to be sweet. Sometimes It just has to be served. And for me, that was more than enough. The 3 months that followed the mediation were quiet. It was a new kind of quiet, different from the heavy silence of my old house after Eleanor passed, and different from the tense, waiting silence of the weeks leading up to the confrontation. This was a clean quiet, an earned quiet. My days in the beige apartment found a new rhythm, one dictated not by the ghosts of the past, but by the small, tangible tasks of the present. I would wake early, make my coffee, and sit by the window, watching the sun rise over the meticulously landscaped grounds of the retirement community. My mornings were often spent on matters concerning Eleanor's house. I had appointed a proper director to handle the day-to-day operations, a capable woman named Miss Wary. All bright, but she would send me weekly reports. I would read the stories of the women who found shelter there. Their circumstances anonymized, but their gratitude palpable. I read about a young mother who had finally found the courage to enroll in a community college course, and another who was learning to drive. The house, once a vessel for my memories, was now a vessel for their futures. It was a strange and profound alchemy. I was no longer just the keeper of a legacy. I was the steward of a new one. The news about Derek came not as a storm, but as a brief, clinical update from Mrs. Hayes. There was no dramatic trial. Faced with the evidence of forgery and the testimony of the bank's fraud department, Derek had accepted a plea bargain. He was sentenced to 2 years of probation, a hefty fine, and 500 hours of community service. He had avoided prison, but his name and his mugshot were now a permanent, searchable part of the public record. His fledgling company, built on my money and his own arrogance, had evaporated, leaving behind a trail of debt that was now solely his to bear. He's been humbled. Art, Mrs. Hayes had said over the phone, or at least, he's been cornered. There's a difference. I agreed. Humility is a change of heart. Being cornered is just a change of circumstances. I heard nothing from Chloe. The 3-word text message, "I'm sorry, Dad," remained on my phone, unanswered. I would look at it sometimes, trying to decipher its weight. Was it an apology for her complicity in the fraud, an apology for trying to have me declared mentally incompetent, or was it simply an apology for getting caught? I did not know. And so I did not respond. An apology without understanding is just a word. One afternoon, while returning from the grocery store, I saw her. It was a chance encounter in the parking lot. She was getting into an old, dented sedan, the kind of car a person drives when they have no other choice. She looked thin, her clothes worn. The designer handbag was gone, replaced by a simple cloth tote. Our eyes met for a fleeting second across the expanse of asphalt. I saw panic in her gaze, then shame. She quickly looked away and got into her car, driving off without a wave or a word. I stood there for a long moment, the plastic grocery bags cutting into my hands, feeling nothing but a deep, hollow ache. This was the consequence she had chosen. A week later, a letter arrived. It was not a bill or a bank statement. The envelope was plain. My name and address written in a familiar, looping script. It was from Chloe. I let it sit on my small kitchen table for a full day. A silent emissary from a world I had detached myself from. I was afraid to open it. I was afraid of what I might find inside: more excuses, more blame. Another attempt at manipulation. Finally, the next morning, with a fresh cup of coffee in hand, I slit the envelope open. It was not what I expected. The letter was long, several pages filled with that same familiar handwriting. There were no requests for money. There were no pleas for forgiveness. It was just a confession. Dad, it began. I don't know if you'll even read this. I wouldn't blame you if you threw it away. I'm not writing to ask for anything. I just needed to say things that I couldn't say over the phone. Things I was too cowardly to say in person. She wrote about meeting Derek, about how his confidence and ambition had seemed so dazzling to her. She wrote about how, slowly, his ambition had curdled into entitlement, and how she had let it happen. She admitted that she knew, deep down, that they were living beyond their means, that the money they were spending was not theirs to spend. I told myself it was what you would have wanted, she wrote, and I could see the tear stains that had smudged the ink on this part of the page. I told myself you were lonely, and that by letting us live in the house, you were buying a family. It was a lie, I told myself, so I wouldn't have to face the truth we were using you. I was using you. She wrote about the mediation. She described the shame she felt sitting there, listening to Sarah lie, knowing she was a silent partner in that lie. She wrote about the moment I revealed the donation of the house. It wasn't anger I felt. She wrote, it was awe. In that moment, you weren't just my dad anymore. You were a man I didn't know. A man who had outplayed all of us. You took back your power. And you did it without raising your voice. You simply told the truth. She had left Derek the day he was arrested. She was living in a small apartment across town, working 2 jobs to pay her bills. She was in therapy. The letter ended simply, I don't expect you to forgive me. I haven't forgiven myself. I just wanted you to know that I see it now. I see everything. And I am sorry. Not just because we got caught. I am sorry for what I did. I folded the letter and placed it back in the envelope. The hollow ache I had felt in the parking lot was still there. But it was joined by something else. Something fragile and tentative. It was not forgiveness. It was not trust. It was, perhaps, the possibility of a beginning. I waited a week. I let her words settle. I let my own emotions settle. Then, I picked up my phone and sent a text message. The coffee shop on Main Street. Saturday, 10 a.m. She arrived exactly on time. She looked nervous. Her hands wrapped around a cup of tea as if for warmth. We sat in silence for a few moments. The air between us was thick with unspoken words, with years of disappointment. Thank you for coming, she said finally. Her voice soft. Thank you for the letter, I replied. It was honest. We talked for over an hour. It was not a conversation about the past, not a rehashing of old wounds. We talked about the present. She told me about her jobs, about her small apartment, about the simple, difficult reality of her new life. I told her about Eleanor's house, about the women it was helping. For the first time in years, we were not a father and a dependent daughter. We were 2 adults, sitting at a table, speaking to each other. As we were about to leave, I looked at her, really looked at her. For the first time since that Thanksgiving, the entitled, careless woman was gone. In her place was someone more somber, more thoughtful, someone who had been broken and was slowly trying to piece herself back together. Chloe, I said, my voice steady. I don't know what the future holds for us. Trust is not a switch that can be flipped back on. It has to be built, one small, honest piece at a time. Tears welled in her eyes. But this time, they were quiet tears. She simply nodded. I know. Dad, I understand. We walked out of the cafe and stood on the sidewalk for a moment. I did not hug her. It was too soon for that. I just placed my hand on her shoulder for a brief second. "Take care of yourself," I said. Then I turned and walked away. The path forward was not clear. The wounds were still there. But as I walked back to my quiet, peaceful apartment, I knew that the game was truly over. What came next was not a game. It was just life. And for the first time, my daughter was finally ready to live it on her own. This peace wasn't given to me. I had to take it back. I had to fight a war without firing a shot, using only silence, patience, and the cold, hard logic of the rules they thought I was too old to remember. It was a victory that tasted less of sweetness and more of justice. If this story sounds familiar, if you have ever felt invisible in your own home, or like a resource to be managed rather than a person to be loved, know this: your dignity is the one asset that no one can take from you. It's never too late to draw a line. It's never too late to demand the respect you've earned. Let my story be a quiet reminder that the most powerful move is sometimes no move at all, just the firm, unshakable decision to no longer participate in your own erasure.